This is the Army Painter marketing team.
Hey, and welcome to the Las Vegas Open, and I'm here joined with Caleb Wissenback. How you doing, Caleb?
Good, I'm doing great.
Are you ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
We're going to be talking today about speed, quality, when it comes to the hobby, painting, and everything in between. And I can't think of anybody better to talk on this subject about. Because I know you love a speed paint.
Oh, I love the speed paint.
He does love a speed paint.
No.
But Caleb, for those that might not know, whether they're at home watching or here in the audience, who is Caleb Wissenback? Where was your beginning in the hobby?
My beginning of the hobby? I got into the hobby as a kid, playing Rogue Trader, fell out of the hobby, got into life, did regular things, but came back to the hobby. I was a MMO gamer, and it was like taking over my life. So I had to quit doing that. Fell back into 40K, was playing tournaments, love tournaments, which is crazy. I haven't even played a single game at 10th, like at all.
Yet.
We talked about that earlier.
You need to come to my workshops.
I know. I need to learn how to play.
So when was it that you really found, obviously, the hobby, the painting? When did that really come about for you in, creating CK Studios? Like, tell us a bit about that.
Oh man, that was a journey. We were playing tournaments, and back then, and I hate to date myself, but the hobby score was a big part of the tournament score. So I spent a lot of time painting my armies. Found out I liked painting the armies more than playing them. I started basing my army list on what I wanted to paint, not what played well. So of course my score started going down, but it just kind of set that spark for the painting side of it. And then next thing you know, I took a couple painting classes, Adepticon, some of those different places that offer hobby classes.
And you were learning on those classes?
Yes, I was learning on those classes. And man, it just lit the fire. I went to my first games day, ended up getting like a finisher pin, and I don't know. I knew I wanted to go compete. I knew I wanted to just start painting better. I really like the technical aspect. I don't feel like I'm very artistic. I really like the technical side, the rule side of painting, why color theory works and things like that. And it's just, it's just a relaxation. You sit down and chill out in front of the TV or whatever you're doing and start painting, and next thing you know, 5 hours are gone and you just feel kind of relaxed. And that's what really got me into the painting part of it. And of course, I'm very competitive. So once I found the competitive side of painting, I got into that, got invited to go teach. I think Nova was like one of my first places that I taught at. I found out I was pretty good at that. Bought an airbrush, was horrible at the airbrush, hated it, threw it in the box, said I was never going to use it again. And then I just decided, I was going to spend the time to learn how to use it, and went through all those trials, made all the mistakes that everybody made notes of it, and eventually I figured out that I could show people what I was doing, and that was kind of the basis for CK Studios. I met Kat, she was running the Hobby Hangout. I was working with the consortium, I think it was called. It was Chung. I don't know if you guys remember Lester and Chung. They were kind of like the first YouTube influencers, if you'd call them, for the hobby. Back, right at the start of all this stuff, back in around 2009.
You said there that you were going to put the airbrush down, right? You'd never use it again.
Yeah, it was so frustrating.
So what made you really persevere with it? Because you are an exceptional airbrusher. What made you pick it back up? Like surely you just use a brush, right?
The challenge of it. The challenge of it. I spent a ton of money. I bought the high-end brush. Like, that was what I was told to get. Got the high-end brush. Did all the research that everybody does. Read all the forums, and found all the things and how to thin your paints with, the ratio of fairy dust to baby tears and all that stuff, And it was just frustrating, but the challenge of it, to figure it out and get it to work. And once I got it to work and saw the benefits of the airbrush, I was sold at that point. And then I just wanted to find out what the limits were, and I just kept experimenting.
In how far is like the airbrush and miniature world come on now over the last like 10 years?
This was right at the start of when, like at the time that I was airbrushing, if you painted a model for Golden Demon with an airbrush, it was not officially disqualified, but it was pretty frowned upon because everybody felt that airbrushing was like this magic cheat, I guess, and not many people were using it, but it was really frowned upon for competition painting, and then everybody in the modeling world was using it. The model trains, the historical vehicles, they've been using airbrushes since like the 70s, and that was the techniques that I started studying, was what those guys were using, and found the little tricks and techniques, everything that makes up like the CK Studio class, the filtering and the fading, the modulation, color modulation, that's huge in model, historical modeling, stuff like that. And yeah, I just wanted to bring those concepts over to miniature painting.
And what's the benefits of painting with an airbrush compared to a normal paintbrush?
Speed. It's all about speed. When I became a commission painter, I was painting pretty much 95% of my commission painting was done with the airbrush, because it's the speed aspect of it. The feathering, blending, all that stuff. If you were to try to do the feathering, the blendings that I like to do with like the speed paints with a paintbrush, it'd be hours of work versus minutes with the airbrush.
When you say feathering, for people that might not know what that means, describe that.
It's just a term for blending. With airbrushing, obviously, you're painting transparent layers. No matter if you're painting like using an opaque paint or whatever medium you're using with the airbrush, it's going to be transparent because the airbrush is inherently transparent. So we use kind of those light terms. Feathering would be kind of like using a transparent layer over another layer. It's just another word for blending. I'm blending two colors together, layering them on top of each other.
Yeah, like some of the classes that I've, had the luxury to sit in of yours, and I'm at the back taking pictures, but secretly I'm taking notes, and I'm thinking, oh, that was really good, what you said there. And one of the most interesting things for me to see was how you use colors from your primer, and then other colors to use as your highlight color. And then when you started putting all these layers over it of what the color was actually going to be, and I think it was yellow you did.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd never have thought to have done that. And the effect you had was so fast, effective, and straight away I wanted to go home and practice.
Right, and that's the benefit of the airbrush, right, is that how fast and effective it is. Now, there's quite a learning curve. The learning curve and the price point of getting into airbrushing for miniature painting is kind of that hindrance. But once you can get over that learning curve, the stuff you can do with the airbrush, you can crank out armies like super fast. You're talking a squad in 20 or 30 minutes.
But, people do say it is an investment, right? However, if you want to paint quickly and to a good standard, even a top paintbrush isn't cheap anymore, is it? And for how quickly you can go through paintbrushes, especially if you're like me and might not, necessarily take the best care of them, and the amount of money that we actually spend on the miniatures anyway, I don't think the investment is that crazy, do you know what I mean, compared to certainly other hobbies anyway that you could do.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't get the wear on the airbrush that you get on a paintbrush. So yeah, you can invest in a high-end set of Kolinsky Sable brushes. You're gonna be in it $100 plus. You can go out and buy a quality airbrush for $100, and you'd be at that same point.
Because I always think you want to spend your money on a good airbrush. But what a lot of people do, because what I did, was I went on eBay or whatever, and bought the cheapest airbrush I could buy. And it was probably the biggest mistake I ever made airbrushing.
Yeah, we see that a lot, especially with the beginner students that come into the CK class. They'll show up with some of those bargain basement brushes. And, I mean, they're effective. They're effective for if you want to base coat and you want to prime, do some painting like that. But when you want to kind of start to up your game, it is definitely worth buying that that quality brush.
Because you needed, like, I remember the one I had, I need like tools to take it apart, and you try and clean it, and you know, like these misconceptions of like, oh, it takes longer to clean your airbrush than it does actually airbrush the models, right? And that was because I had a terrible, really bad airbrush, and also you combine that with being a really bad airbrusher. I had no technical skills whatsoever, but I had a device that was so cheap it just wasn't forgiving. So I found that obviously when you invest in a better airbrush, actually it's so much easier. It is not that difficult to clean and maintain, and you can be a bit messy with it, and it still works really, really well, right? So what would you say some of the biggest mistakes are people make with airbrushing when they first start out?
When they first start, the biggest mistake that I see is actually the cleaning. And like you brought up, and that was one of the frustrations of why I wanted to quit airbrushing when I first got it. I got this airbrush, I went and bought it, put everything together, started airbrushing. I spent more time cleaning out clogs and cleaning dry tip than actually painting. You know, you're spending an hour or two of your paint time messing with the airbrush instead of painting, and at that point I was like, I might as well just brush paint because I've wasted all this time anyways. The education part of it is learning we don't need to tear our airbrush apart every time we use it. I actually learned that that's detrimental to the airbrush, and that was one of those learning lessons, was how to properly clean, gain the right. At CK Studios, we call it airbrush hygiene. It's those good habits that you develop that will allow you to continue to keep airbrushing without getting all the clogs, without getting all the problems. Things like pulling the needle out if there's paint in the brush. The biggest mistake most people do is when they get dry tip, they take the tip of the airbrush apart to get the nozzle with paint inside the brush. And what happens is that paint gets past the seals and clogs up the whole front of the nozzle, and you're trying to fix a minor issue like a dry tip, and now you've clogged the entire front of the brush. You're not going to be able to continue washing or airbrushing. You're going to have to take the whole thing apart, wash it, stuff like that. Those little techniques, those little tips like that are the most important to learn.
Yeah, I think like the best analogy I know of is your airbrush hygiene is like brushing your teeth. It should be really simple. You do it every day, or a lot of the times when you're using the airbrush, a quick rinse between colors, a quick, you know, brush of the needle or the tip anyway with a, you know, something that the ferrule doesn't hit it, right? But taking it apart, stripping it, it's a bit like going to the dentist.
Yeah.
You want to go there every 6 months. You don't want to be doing it every day, because like you said, you could end up putting it back slightly incorrectly. It's a hassle, it's a pain, and there's so many little tips, right? So do you think when we talk about like getting an airbrush clog, where does that stem from? How does that happen, and how do we prevent it from happening?
Well, I mean, dry tip is going to be the most common issue that you're going to get with airbrushing, because we're using an acrylic paint, and acrylic cures by air. Well, that's what we're using to apply the paint with, is air. So we're already against it right there with just the medium we're using and what the airbrush works. So it's kind of inherent that you're going to start to get that drying and stuff like that. But there's little tricks, there's little techniques like you know, every 30, 40 seconds I like to come off the model, do these little bursts that are going to clear the brush so that I'm not allowing the paint to dry on the tip of the brush. Airbrush hygiene, you know, that coming off and clearing the tip.
So when you say clear the tip, you mean like pull the trigger back really hard and like blast fresh paint over it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if you've ever, anybody that's watching that's taken the CK Studio classes with me will know what we're talking about. You'll see a lot of times when I'm airbrushing, there's going to be these spots of paint all over my work area. And what I'm doing is I'm coming off the model and I'm snapping the trigger and I'm making the needle open all the way up with a full blast of air and then snap closed. And what that does is it'll take any paint that's starting to kind of dry on the front of the brush, it's going to expel that. It's going to shoot it off, and it's going to replace it with nice, fresh, liquidy paint. And that's going to allow for less dry tip. The other thing is you know, you want to have like a little Q-tip available that you can gently clean the needle. Getting ahead of the dry tip by kind of getting in those habits and looking at that tip and cleaning it every 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. Just take a moment to pause and do a quick clean. Little things like when you're painting the same color, you might be using the same color about every 4 color cups. Do a full flush. Even though you're still using the same color, just get some of that paint that's starting to build up in there, get rid of that. One thing I always encourage my students with airbrushing is understand the airbrush is about saving time. It's not about saving paint. Don't be afraid to get rid of a little paint because that's going to help in the long run when you're not getting the clogs and you're not spending the time taking the brush apart and having to soak it in isopropyl alcohol and stuff like that.
One of the best things that or tips that I learned was actually not be lazy and make sure I put my paint lids back on my paint pots. Because what was happening with me was I'm super lazy and, you know, you're leaving the lid off and you want to just keep, you know, filling your cup back up. But the paint's drying, right? And then what happens is you then pour it straight into the top and you're literally pouring in clogs that are ready to go. And that is the paint that you're putting in. What would be your advice to me to stop that from happening?
I mean, yeah, putting the cap on. When we start miniature painting, we're going to start with a brush. We've already bought a load of paint. It kind of sucks to have to go back and buy the same colors in an airbrush line or something like that. But honestly, to save time and stuff like that, again, the airbrush is about time, not about paint. Buy new paint.
Well, I think even if you've got an airbrush, right, and you know that you want to paint ultramarines, yeah, and maybe you had some ultramarine style blue color, and you've bought some new, you know, your new airbrush. You only actually have to buy, how many paints do you need to buy to get all the layers done of your entire army? How many paints do we need?
2.
2.
Yeah.
So it's not like the investment is huge, right?
Right.
And then I suppose as you go on, you could be like, oh, actually, I want to do the pauldrons with the airbrush, or I want to do the gun with the airbrush, or the base, or whatever else. And then you could just add to your collection of those air paints. So what is the difference between an air paint and a regular acrylic paint?
It's just the composition, whatever the medium of the paint is. So our acrylic paint is made up of three portions, I guess, would make up a paint. One's going to be the pigment. That's going to be what gives it the color. And then we've got the body, or we call it the transmission fluid, the body, or the medium. A lot of times you'll hear of like a airbrush medium or a speed medium or something like that. That's pretty much just the paint without any pigment in it. And then the last thing that's going to make up paint is going to be any additives that might be put into the paint. Maybe a flow improver or a dry retardant, something like that. It's going to be something that just kind of helps to affect the paint a little bit for how it works. The variation between like a standard brush paint and an airbrush paint is the airbrush paint is going to be formulated to shoot through the airbrush. It's going to be a little bit thinner. It's going to have a little bit of a different feel to it. Brush paints, it's really important to have like proper feel. Everybody has their favorite brush paint, whether it's AK or Army Painter or Monument, you know, any of those. Most of the times, the reason someone has a favorite paint is for the brush feel, how that paint feels coming off the brush. Some paint might feel a little jelly, some paint might feel a little thick, some might be nice and watery. It really depends on what like your favorite feel of it is. And that's where the variation is going to be a lot with an air paint, because that air paint's going to be formulated more for the airbrush. So it's going to be a little less dense. Usually they're a little heavier in pigment because the paint is inherently transparent. They might be a touch heavier in pigment, but they'll have a lot more liquid to it. You know, one comment that one of our friends over at Reaper, the reason that they didn't want to make air paints is she said she didn't want to sell water to customers. You know, because you do have to thin down air paints to get them to work, because the goal of an air paint is to shoot through an airbrush without having to thin.
That was going to be my next question is, do you have to thin air paints?
You know, every line is different, and then every brush is different. So
and every color is going to be different, right?
And every color is going to be different. So for Army Painter, for instance, we've designed our paints to be shot directly through an airbrush without any thinning with that variable range of airbrush of somewhere around a 0.3 to about a 0.5. Anytime, I haven't found an airbrush ready acrylic paint like what's marketed to miniature painters. I haven't found an acrylic paint that shoots through like a 0.2 or a 0.15 without a little bit of thinning yet. And over the years with CK Studios, I think we've used just about every air paint that's out there. But they do vary by brand. Some will shoot a little bit easier, a little bit better. Just depends.
My favorite is the Evolution, by Harder and Steenbeck.
Yes.
And I love out of the two, the larger of the head sizes. So that includes like the needle, the nozzle, obviously the needle tip. For me, I just find for army painting, it's incredible. I can just get a lot of color down, I get less clogs. And do you think that with airbrushing, people can get a bit too technical with it and actually is a barrier for them to actually improve as an airbrusher?
Yes.
Like too worried about the PSI and the thinning, and they
yes.
get too bogged down in the details, but without just painting and getting creative.
Yes, definitely. One of the, a big issue that we run into, especially with new artists that are picking up the airbrush, is they are intimidated by it. They are afraid of it because of all those moving parts you're talking about. The PSI, how much thinning, it's too thick, it's too thin, dry tip, dropping the needle, all that stuff, that they're afraid to use the airbrush. The whole start of CK Studios was teaching the 101 class. And our 101 class was literally designed to take the fear of airbrushing away. We had our students bring their airbrushes to the class, their paints and everything, and we would go through the weekend painting with their stuff. The results they were getting were great, and they were learning from it. That wasn't our goal. Our goal was to get them to not be afraid of their airbrush. And yeah, people get really caught up with that. And it's easy to get caught up with that, especially with how much information is out there now and the variables of the airbrush. The variables are really important, and understanding the variables, because what works for one person in Alaska won't work for the same person using the exact same paints. All that stuff won't work in Florida.
And that's because of the temperature, the humidity, how the paint interacts in the air, right?
Everything. From air pressures to how they hold their hand while they're airbrushing. I mean, there's so many different little variables that will affect the outcome of the airbrushing, and that becomes very intimidating. It can become overwhelming.
So I want to get into the nuts and bolts now, okay, of army painting.
Right.
So imagine you and me, we're on a project. We've got to get an army battle ready. We want at least 3 colors on there, at least, but to a good standard, yeah? Are we going, I don't know, rattle cans? Are we going airbrush? Are we doing speed paints? What is going to be the simplest and fastest way to get an army from gray to, nicely displayed for a table? And how are we going to do it? Talk me through the steps. We'll go with Space Marine Army. You can pick the chapter.
All right. So we're going to do Space Marines. Let's do a hard one. Let's do Imperial Fist. We're going to paint yellow.
We're going to paint yellow.
We're going to paint yellow.
That is everybody's worst nightmare, yellow.
Yeah. People hate yellow. I love yellow.
Why is yellow so hard to paint with? Just as a concept.
Because of the pigment. Yellow pigment is a very weak pigment. It's a very soft pigment. The pigment for yellow is very expensive, so the saffron or whatever they're using as the pigment, because of that, companies cut corners. Their paint might not be very opaque. It's got that transparency issue.
And when you paint, you just see with a brush anyway. You just see every single paint line you've made, and it looks horrific, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. All those issues. Right. So yellow's always historically been difficult. The airbrush makes yellow like a breeze.
So we've built the models. They're ready.
They're ready.
Our Imperial Fist chapter.
All right.
We're going classic scheme, yeah?
Okay, we're going to go classic scheme. So we just want to go with just our standard Imperial Fist yellow. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to primer the model black.
Every model black?
Every model's black.
We're going to put yellow on black.
We're going to put yellow on black because of the airbrush being inherently transparent. And what the goal is to build that color up. If you take, I love using the example of fire engine red. If we took fire engine red paint and we put it in the airbrush and we sprayed it over a white prime model, we're going to get fire engine red. You might get a little bit of the white showing through where our paint's a little thinner, but you're pretty much going to get fire engine red. Now, if I take that same...
So you mean like a flat color, like it's when it goes down on the object over white, it's going to just look completely the same throughout, yeah?
Yep, it's just going to be, that red.
Okay.
Now, if I take that same fire engine red and I spray it over a black prime model, my initial coat is not going to be fire engine red. It's going to be a really dark, rich, like burgundy wine, kind of dark blood red color. And then what we're going to do is we call insisting. We're going to build up to opaque layers. Little trick that, you know, as you advance in airbrushing, you're going to learn how to spray smaller areas. So as I'm spraying, as I'm applying more paint, I'm going to start dialing down how much area I'm covering. So I won't cover the entire model with my second layer. My third layer will be even less. My fourth layer will be even smaller.
So every layer you put down then, you're just focusing on, like, let's say in your first pass, you do 100% of the model with the airbrush, like turning it upside down and getting in all the nuts and crannies. So it's got that, like you said, that rich, dark, blood red color.
Yep.
And then in your next pass, you might do like, what, 75% of the model?
Exactly.
And on the next pass, 50%,
yep.
25%, and you're just getting smaller and smaller with your passes. And do you think about lighting when you do that, like from a certain area? Where are those extra layers going onto the model?
Yeah, it'll be exactly from the direction of light. When I start airbrushing, when I'm teaching the airbrushing classes, I start telling my students, start thinking in the terms of you're not necessarily painting a model with a color, you're painting a model with light. And you start to build the light on the model.
Because it's black. Do you actually use the light source that you have, like in front of you? As
yeah.
So like we've got a light right here.
Yep.
So we would add, if we were using this as our directional source, you would put more and more layers coming from this same direction onto me, so then this part would be much redder, and then this part would be much darker to create that shadow effect, right?
Right, and the airbrush is very directional. So all you need to do is just paint from the direction that the light's coming from. That's one of the great things about the airbrush is how directional it is. A lot of people are already using those concepts with miniature painting, whether they know it or not. If they're zenithal priming, that's exactly what they're doing, is they're applying light to a model. You're going to prime your model black, and then you're going to apply that white over the top, creating the light that you want to apply to the model. And then we're going to go back and tint it. And that's all we're doing with the zenithal, is just tinting the existing light. You can do that with the airbrush, but the airbrush is nicer because you can get smaller and tighter with it. It's not a big broad spray like a rattle can. And we're going to use that very similar technique to zenithal priming for this concept of this army. So we've primed our model black. Now we're going to start building the light. So come closer.
That's it, yeah.
We're going to start building the light with the model. So it's prime black. Now I'm not going to go directly to yellow. You can go directly to yellow with the airbrush, but I'm going to save the yellow to my little secret sauce at the end.
Okay.
What I'm going to actually do is I'm going to take an ochre color. Some people like pink. I like ochre. I'm going to take ochre, and I'm going to do what's called a directional base coat.
And ochre's like the traditional like tau color, right?
Yeah, the traditional tau color, that desert yellow or tau sept, or I don't know the names of all the different lines, but that color. We're going to go in there and we're going to start to shoot downward with like that light directional. We're going to build that ochre up. Once I finish up with my layer of ochre, I'm going to try to bring that up to opaque, nice opaque ochre, with all the shadows remaining black. So I don't want to spray up on the model. I'm always spraying kind of downward with the model, and that's going to allow that light to build up. Then I'm going to go to pure white, and we kind of call this, Justin has coined the term, we're going to be an airbrush sniper. We're going to go in and we're just going to put like a white highlight on the head, on the shoulder pads, on the knee pad, on the back of the leg, on the back of the backpack, stuff like that. We're going to do some pure white light. Now, this is where you hear the term from CK Studios, the ugly phase. This is where the ugly phase comes in. Your model is going to be really garish because it's going to have like all these super bright lights, all these really bad shadows. Nothing's very smooth. The airbrush, you've seen it when you spray pure white with the airbrush. It gets that real sprinkly look to
like
it and all that stuff.
Dusty, right?
Yeah, that dusty look. It looks like garbage, right? So we're going to go ahead and build all that up. Let it go. This should take us like 10 minutes.
And would you do this like model 1 from the unit, then you go to model 2 and model 3 and model 4 and model 5? Would you do a whole unit like this?
Yeah, I'm going to do the whole unit. I'm going to go all the way through all of them. So if I'm doing a 10-man unit, I'm going to do all the ochre, and then I'm going to come back and do all the white highlights. Now we're talking at this point, we're probably 20 minutes in to our army, not including the building.
Sure, yeah.
But with the priming and then put down the ochre, put down the pure white, we're about 10 minutes in on our model. I'm going to let that kind of set and dry, and then I'm going to go over to my toolbox of stuff, and I'm going to grab my speed paint.
Your speed paint?
Yeah, my speed paint.
You're going to put, what,
Yep.
just brush it on?
Nope, we're going to put that right through the airbrush. The speed paints, these transparent paints, I don't know what we're calling these paints yet. So a few people call them, like, I guess the term contrast paint. A lot of people will refer to them as contrast paint. But they're these color shift transparent colors.
They're like a thick ink, aren't they, really?
Right. Yeah, we don't really have a term for them yet.
Yeah.
So you got your express paints, you got your speed paints, you got your contrast paints. I'm not sure exactly what the AK's version is called, but all the lines have this color. These transparent shifting colors. They are amazing through the airbrush, and we're going to do a technique called filtering. So again, it's a term that comes from like the camera hobby. And imagine that like you're looking through a camera and you're looking out on a visage and a vista, and it's a river coming down into a lake with the mountains and the trees, and you've got all these greens and blues and reds and whites and all these amazing colors. If you were to take a piece of red visqueen and put it over the cover, over the lens, you're still going to have all the mountains, you still have all the rocks and all that stuff, but everything's going to be red tinted. We're going to do the same thing. So with this filter, what we're going to do is we're going to take our speed paint, we're going to put it in our airbrush, and we're going to do a gentle light coat over the entire model. So all those little highlights where you shot the highlights right here, but you got the shadows here, you got the mid-tones, all that stuff that you developed real fast in like 10 minutes with the airbrush, we've all tinted it, and that's where you're going to get that yellow.
Do you need to thin down the speed paints?
No, we're going to
just
shoot
straight through.
Yep. The only time that I ever thin, per se, the speed paints is if they're too powerful. There's a couple colors out there that are just like super powerful. The orc skin, a few others. If you spray those directly onto the model, you're just going to get the dark green, like right off the bat. It's just too powerful. So maybe a color like that, I'll add a little speed paint. Medium to
and with
it.
the speed paint, do you just go all the way over the model, or are you going the same directional light source again?
No, we're going to spray everything because we want to tint
everything,
even those shadows. So anywhere that primer's showing, we don't want black primer showing, but you shoot that speed paint over that black primer, you're going to have a yellow tinted black, which would be a yellow shadow.
Yeah.
Where it's a mid-tone of that ochre color, you're going to have it tinted yellow, so now you've got a mid-tone yellow. And then those highlights, those bright white spots, those are going to be tinted yellow. Those are our highlight yellows. So now we're probably 18 minutes, maybe 20 minutes into our painting. Our model, we have a yellow Imperial Fist.
And you've only really had to clean your airbrush between the prime and the ochre.
We haven't even really cleaned our airbrush.
You haven't even done a flush?
All we're doing is flushing.
That's what I mean.
All we're doing is
just filling the cup up, flushing it through.
Yep.
You would have done that between maybe your primer and your ochre.
Yep.
And then your ochre and your white.
Usually I'll shoot the ochre until it's done, and I'll put the white directly on top.
Straight in?
Yeah, because I want variation in color anyways. I'm shooting over ochre, so it doesn't matter if the white's mixing with the ochre.
Give you a nice blend.
Yeah. Now, when you do start the speed paint, you have to do a good flush. You don't want any opaque paint in the cup.
Is that because it's going to change the consistency and the texture?
It will make the speed paint milky.
Okay.
You'll end up getting a milky color. So you want to make sure you do a good flush with that, and then you're going to shoot the speed paint over it. The nice thing about speed paints is, and any of these transition, transparent, I don't know what we're going to call them.
Yeah.
The more you apply, the darker they get, and that's the magic of them. Especially the yellows. They're some of my favorite.
But I'm assuming if you apply too many coats, you'll lose those nice shades you've created?
Yeah, if you apply too many coats, that's the one thing with the speed paints. The more you apply, the darker they get. They'll never get brighter. They'll always get darker. So if you accidentally go too heavy on it and you get too dark, just come back and shoot your highlight again.
Okay.
You just shoot it with the airbrush. That's the nice thing about the airbrush. It puts such thin layers on that you don't have to worry about over painting your model, losing all the detail. You can go back and repaint over your model. Example is, you know, in our 101 class, we paint a Dreadnought, that Contemptor Dreadnought. At the end of the class, I'll have a Dreadnought 99% painted at the end of the class. I primer it black, and it's ready for the next class. I've got Dreadnoughts that have been through like 8 classes.
Wow.
And they're still good. That's so
amazing.
nice about the airbrush, is it's very forgiving in that aspect.
Yeah.
Is you just, if you make a mistake, just paint back over it.
Okay, so we're doing our Imperial Fist. We've got it yellow. We've got some nice highlights, some depth of color. So how would we apply an edge highlight now? Because obviously you can't edge highlight in a, you know, maybe there's like a couple of areas you want to, like on the helmet, you know, you got those nice sharp edges. You want to get a bit of an edge on there. It's really difficult to edge highlight with a speed paint, right? Because like you said, it's only going to get darker if you just paint that on. How are we going to do an edge highlight now?
Yeah. That's where we're going to go back to the opaque paints. We're going to go to our traditional miniature painting, and that's the concept. So I'm going to use the speed paint to build all the tint, create all the variation in color, the highlights, shadows, all that stuff. That's what it's meant for. That's what that speed paint is designed to do, is create the highlights and shadows, all that stuff. Now I'm going to go back in with a regular brush, do all my edging. I'm also going to do what's called pin washing. I'm going to use, I like to use a speed paint. You can like do a clear coat over the model and use like an ink, or oil wash, where you kind of dab, and it's called pin washing, where you'll dab and it'll run through all of them. You have to be careful when you're using those concepts with the airbrush, because the airbrush paints with little dots, and it'll make a slightly rough texture. And if you want that capillary action, it will bleed out. So that's why we're going to kind of put a clear coat. A lot of people put clear coat. I don't do that. I'm a lazy painter on top of everything else. I like to be lazy. So I'm not going to do a bunch of extra steps. I'm just going to take a regular speed paint black or a dark brown or something like that. I'm going to use a very fine tip brush. I prefer the Artist Opus, like a size 1. I'm going to get a really nice fine tip, and I'm just going to go through and do a quick pin wash through the
brown or something, you said?
Huh?
With a brown color.
With a brown or a black. Either will work. If it's black, it might make your Imperial Fist look just slightly cartoony. If you use a brown, it'll be a little more natural looking. You can also create a little more grim dark if you want to go that aspect by letting that brown just feather out just a little bit. But what I want to do is be real precise and just go through and do a quick pin wash. This is going to be time consuming. You're going to spend as much time with your edge highlights and your pin wash that you did with all of the airbrushing. So those two steps, there's not really like a
but they're not essential, right? They're not like an essential step to get an army looking good just to play with, are they?
No, they're not essential. They're essential to me.
Yeah.
I always feel like my models are unfinished if I don't do that.
Okay.
But you could just go in and just do a quick edge highlight, then go paint your guns, the gunmetal color you want. Speed paints are amazing with that. Do a quick dry brush of white over your areas that are going to be black, and then take like Cloudburst. I think it's called Cloudburst Gray. It's one of my favorite speed paint colors. Do a quick speed paint. Your guns are done.
Really?
Like
okay.
3 seconds, 3 or 4 seconds.
Because even if you get that done, you could always go back in. Once the army's like tabletop ready, you've done the nice yellows, we've done some guns, we've done some like ribbing in some black or something. You could always later on, before like your next tournament, just do a few pin washes, couldn't you, and a few edge highlights?
Absolutely.
Because we haven't we're skipping stages, but we're not leaving our models in a place where we can't revisit them to bring them up another level.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the technique that we're using with the airbrush. You can always build over the top of it.
So what if you make a mistake? So in this, you know, I find this sometimes when I'm airbrushing, I make a mistake, and it's really difficult to find the perfect color to then, because you've got like lots of gradients, haven't you? How do you fix your mistakes?
That's the rough one. When you're at the point, like let's say you've already done all of your trim work, you don't want to go back to the airbrush, because if you go back to the airbrush, you're probably going to get over those trim areas. So a little repair that I like to do is I'm going to use a dry brush, and I'm just going to apply. If I need to fix a bright area, I'm going to dry brush a bright white color, either bright yellow or bright white. I'm just going to dry brush over that mistake until it's smoothed out. The dry brush and the airbrush really, they kind of hold a few similar traits in that they're inherently transparent, and you can actually create very smooth transitions with a dry brush because of the transparency of it. So I'll just go over that area that I made a mistake and gently dry brush that, bringing the light back up. I'm going to go almost to pure white, and then instead of using the airbrush to apply the speed paint, I'm just going to use a paintbrush and just do a very light glaze with the speed paint right over that area. It won't get into the trim, it won't get into any of those areas, and it will maintain that same color. Because you're using the speed paint as your basis color, your repair is always speed paint. But you just have to be mindful. Speed paint only gets darker. So if you're applying it in a bright area, you have to put that bright back. And that's where the dry brush white comes in.
Yeah, I've never thought to do that, because in the past I'm always trying to find an opaque color to match, and it never does, right?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
So sometimes I'm like, oh, can I put a transfer over it? Can I weather that area in an opaque color? So it's like, yeah, deliberately weathered it here, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But that, no, I never thought about that, so I'm going to do that. I think that's a really nice tip.
And I shouldn't say that will never happen. You can do it. I do it all the time. Being able to mix paints and see the tonal values of it, if you're just absolutely insistent on not dry brushing to make that fix, but finding an opaque paint, all I do is I just take my yellow and start mixing speed paint into it until I get it to the color that I need to match, because it's still speed paint.
Well, you also gave me a tip once. You said about if I wanted like a more vibrant red, to drop some of the speed paint red into my opaque paints, and it really boosted the color.
Yes.
Which was really nice for like Blood Angels I was painting at the time. But okay, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper now, okay? Because I think that was a good summary for people that want to learn how to airbrush and paint armies. What's been the proudest moment as a teacher for you?
The proudest moment?
As a teacher, yeah.
It's when my students come over and they're winning Golden Demons. They're, Will Hahn. I remember when he first came and started classes with us, and he had all these questions about competition painting and getting into competition painting. And the next thing you know, flash forward a couple of years, I mean, he's winning awards at Monte San Savino and stuff like that. I had a student come up to me today that took a bunch of my classes. He's teaching his first class here at LVO. Those are my most proud moments, is when you see those students and they start like, they make that hobby theirs.
That's a real legacy you're leaving.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What would you, the impact that you've had on the hobby, what would you like to be remembered for?
Oh, I don't know. I learned the hobby from other people, and it's really important for me that I share what I've learned with other people, so that the hobby builds and that everybody is always growing. I was in a lot of competition sports when I was younger, and it was all about keeping your secret, keeping that competition edge over your opponents. And coming into the hobby, even competition painting, when I went to my first few Golden Demons, and to see the Slayer Sword winner over there sharing his techniques with his competition, I was like, wow, this is a different attitude. And just sharing that and seeing the communities grow, seeing the hobby grow, and more people get in it, people get excited. I think our legacy is there. When we started the CK Studio, after a couple of years of CK Studio, it was fun to come to the tournaments and walk through the tables, and you could see all the people influenced by CK Studios, because we had a very unique style with our painting, especially with all the modulation and all those concepts that I brought over with me when I started airbrushing. It's been borrowed by a lot of people now, so I can't guarantee at this point that they're influenced by CK Studios, but they're influenced by somebody who was influenced by CK Studios. So you see that legacy in just the style that I paint with on the tabletop, and that's awesome too.
Well, it's why I wanted you here. That's why I wanted you on this stage to talk about it, because I love the way you teach. I think you're a phenomenal teacher, and I can see why so many people have been influenced by your work and maybe not even known they have been because it's been passed on. So I would say that is your legacy. Is, you know, you're extremely humble. You do a fantastic job, and I know there's probably so many artists out there that have looked up to you as a painter and really appreciate what you've done. So I think that's a true legacy there.
Thank you.
So LVO,
Yeah.
how many times have you been?
I missed one LVO since it started.
Wow.
Yeah. I came over here with gosh, man, I'm totally drawing a blank on it. The Hobby Consortium, I really forget what it was called, but it was Chung and Lester and a couple of us. You know, we came over here to the first LVO. We were working with Frontline Gaming at like Bay Area Open. We were holding some paint classes and stuff like that. So we came to the first LVO and hosted classes at the first LVO. Yeah, from there, pretty much every year. One year we missed it. I just was too much going on with CK Studios to be able to come in and work at LVO. But other than that, I've been here every year.
What's so special about the LVO for you?
Yeah. You know, when it's close to home. I'm based up in Reno, so I'm only about 7 hours away from here. A lot of my friends, a lot of the community that I gamed with, I paint with, they all came down here. It started, you know, Frontline Gaming, all of their tournaments kind of started in a barn. If everybody's familiar with the Bay Area Opens, like the first few Bay Area Opens were literally like in this horse stall, this great big giant like horse stall barn at a fairgrounds. And, you know, it started from grassroots and it grew that way, but they always stayed kind of grassroots. And because of that, it just gives a little bit of a different feel, a different attitude to the game, to the hobby, and to the convention. So I've always felt like I've been a part of it, and it's really easy to feel like you're a part of it here. Reese and Frankie do a great job of making people feel like they're included.
Well, from going from a barn to this place,
right?
This is something quite special. What's been your thoughts on the new venue?
This is awesome. I mean, it definitely gives LVO a different feel.
It feels like a true convention now, right?
Yes, yeah, it does feel like a true convention. I like that we're not stacked up on top of each other. The Rio was starting to get a little tight. Everybody remembers those elevator weights. It was definitely getting tight over there. Yeah, this is definitely more of a convention feel. I like the room that we have, but we're still staying pretty tight. Fremont Street has kind of brought back that feel of like being at the Bally's, and you know, when the event was held down there, it's got a little bit more of that Vegas feel. Well, I think we lost that at Rio a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the Strip isn't too far away anyway, so there's like lots of restaurants nearby, which, you know, me and the team have been enjoying going to. So yeah, I mean, Caleb, thanks so much, and I think it's some time. If we've got any questions from the live chat, we can ask them, or any questions from the audience. If there's any questions, do you have any questions? We got some questions. Okay, cool. Jordan. Oh, Amy, you want it? Okay, cool.
Hi, Caleb. So I got two quick questions. One, when is a good time to get kids into airbrush? Should I wait until they're good with regular brush control, or can you hear me now? How's this?
Yeah, as close as possible.
As close as possible. I can't get any closer than this, I'll be eating it.
That's good.
All right. So when is a good time to get kids into airbrushing? Should I wait until they have good, like, regular brush control? Or is it just one of those things you just give it to them and let them go ham with it?
When's the best time to get kids into airbrushing?
I mean, once they have enough motor control to even use an airbrush, get them started on it. You know, go out and get like the Patriot 105. I call that the AK-47 of airbrushes. I mean, that thing will shoot gravel. If you get that really expensive, difficult airbrush, they won't have a good time with it. It'll clog, it'll do a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I would say start them right off with, get one of the cheaper kind of like a 0.4, 0.5 nozzle. Have them start learning how to base coat. Have them start priming your models. Put the speed paints through them. don't worry so much about the results that they're getting. Make sure they're having fun. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
Put down some plastic. But yeah, I wouldn't teach them to be afraid of the airbrush. Let them develop with it, and then as they grow and they get better with it, they'll grow into the higher end airbrushes. And at that point, yeah, then they'll be painting your armies for you.
I find the airbrush such a fun tool to use, way more fun than a brush. So even if you did maybe the Zenithal highlight aspect, and you just said, right, here's the airbrush, here's the speed paint, it doesn't matter directionally where they go, right? Because I think that was the step that you can be messy with it. It's such thin paint. That would be really fun, I think, to do, yeah.
Yeah, because you can just primer right over the model and start again. Coloring books with an airbrush are really fun. So break out the coloring books and let them airbrush the coloring books. The nice thing is the paper will absorb a lot of the paint, so it won't be super messy, but they'll still be a mess.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. I'll definitely take that home. My second question is, for a young adult with a disability, do you think an airbrush would be good for them as well if they're trying to get into the hobby? Or is there another avenue they should go if they don't have like the manual dexterity that one of us would have?
I think it's still that same thing, is to not be afraid of it. Nobody's going to be great with the airbrush the first time they use it. When I teach a lot of my airbrush classes, I'm going to show techniques to them, and the first thing I tell them at the beginning of class is, I do not expect you to master this technique here. The airbrush takes a lot of practice. You can't replace the reps, but don't be afraid of it. Make the mistakes. It really doesn't matter. It's when people get really caught up in needing to be perfect that they'll be super frustrated with it. Enjoy the journey with it. It's the same way as miniature painting with a paintbrush. The first time, if you saw my first mini, you guys be like, oh my goodness, that guy probably should go do something else because he doesn't have a future in miniature painting. But you know, it just takes time. Don't get caught up in the results when you're starting earlier. For that young adult getting into miniature painting, do it for the joy of it and get into the game. Play with your models. The more you play, the more you're going to be interested in painting the models that you're using, which will encourage you to paint more.
I found using a trigger on an airbrush a bit like the first time I ever drove a car. I was just on the accelerator, like go stop. Couldn't quite get the pedal control right, but the more you drive, the smoother you get with that accelerator. And I think the trigger is very similar to that, right? And you just get the feeling of how far you pull the trigger back, how far you need to push it down, when you release it, when you don't. And the repetitions, I think, just will get that ingrained. So, yeah. But do you have any more questions?
No, that's it. Thank you, Caleb. Thanks a lot.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
Caleb, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, your work is phenomenal. Where can people find you if they want to, see more of your work or go to one of your courses?
I've got a very small digital footprint, I guess. I'm not big into the social media. I don't really do. I am thinking about doing some Twitch feeds. I think that'd be a fun new addition if I can get the time for it. But I don't really do videos. I'm pretty much just on Facebook. Really, if you want to get a hold of me, just find CK Studios or Caleb Wissenback on Facebook. That's the best way.
Okay.
To find my courses, I kind of went into retirement a little bit. The work I was doing and how many events we were doing with GW and stuff like that, I got a little burned out of doing all the teaching. But now that I'm with Army Painter, the workload's quite a bit less. So I'm looking at kind of getting back into teaching. So pay attention. I think I'm going to be doing some stuff with Spray Gunner down at their place down in Tampa. We're going to do some stuff in LA. We're going to do some stuff in the Bay Area. So really just kind of watch the CK Studio page on Facebook is the best way.
Okay, great. Well, guys, thank you so much, Caleb. It's been a pleasure as always. I love hanging out and chatting with you. And yeah, if you're here at the convention, you're going to be at the Army Painter stand for the next couple of days, right? So
yep.
You can go and chat to Caleb more about any techniques, and he'll be able to show you what he can do. And just, you've taught me so much, even in certain little bits of passing. So Caleb, thank you so much. So we're going to be back here at 4 o'clock, no, 4:30 and I'm going to be speaking with Adrian from Tabletop Titans, and we're going to be talking about how we can bring narrative play into a competitive setting and how you bridge the gap between the two. So that's coming up at 4:30. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've watched us live, watched us on the playback, hello, Salty John. How are you doing? And we'll see you guys later on at 4:30. See you later.
See you later.